Well, what can I say? Welcome back. Before we go on and talk about what we're doing today, I'd just like you to just think of what has happened with this pandemic and the veterans, members of the family, friends that have gone. We've still got a long way to go to fight it, but we're coming out of it. And the only thing I can ask is stay safe, stay in groups, wear your masks and wash your hands. I've been washing my hands 3 or 4 times a day, but I still haven't been told when can I have a shower. But that's my problem. We won't lag on that. It's over. But just have a think of who's been lost in the last 12 months. I know what people are going through because I've had COVID. The old man that's usually with us, well, he is with us today, but I think he's feeding his face somewhere. He had it, and my wife was rushed into hospital under blue light. So I know the worrying side of it as well. But thank God she's okay. I'm back home. I think I'll leave it at that, and we'll start to talk about our history. Right. We'll start with a little bit of history, and as you can see in front of me, swords. Now, this is the way that in some places, this would be like a court-martial, where you come to the end of the trial, and the officers had contemplated where you're going to go, back to the trenches, heaven or hell, wherever. And what they would have done, they would have had the swords like this, without the scabbards, and if you were innocent, they would have moved the swords so the blades crossed over. If you were guilty, they'd move them out so the blades pointed at you. So if it come pointing at you, you know where you're going to go. And it's not Tesco's, right? Now we'll talk about some of the swords I've got here, and there's one that's really important as far as I'm concerned to the regiment. And just to say thank you to a collector of military from the Rhondda who wants to be kept private. He's lent me these swords to come up and show, on condition I give them back. Still thinking hard on that part, but never mind. You got the swords that for battle and the swords for ceremonial. Now, this would be a type of battle sword. It would be sharp, pointed. 90% of the swords were Wilkinson sword. And the thing to remember is if you get a sword that's a Wilkinson sword, as well as it's not too good on this because it's been used a lot, the same as this one here. But if you get a ceremonial sword, it's got all the etchings down there. It's all engraved. And it's got a number. And we'll get a close-up of this later on. This number. And you can write off to Wilkinson's, give them the details. I think it costs you about £20, but don't quote me on that. You can write off, give the number, send a photograph of the sword, and they'll come back and tell you when it was made, how it was made, who ordered it, and who was it ordered for? Now, I'll deal with this one first. William Ernest Brown, DSO, MC. He was commissioned in 1915. There was a battle that went on, and the Welsh Regiment, I think the words that was used in the regimental history book is annihilation. They were nearly annihilated. And that's the 18th Battalion of the Welsh, 41st. And he got sent there and he took over command. And because of the way that the men responded to him, the morale got up, the reinforcements came in, and they held the battle, and it was like a complete turnaround. The story goes that the men, or the officers of the 24th that served with him, because of his distinction, and where I said he was captain, DSO, MC, he might not have had them decorations at that time, but that's what he ended up with. And he ended up as Lieutenant Colonel. They had a sword made, and on the sword, which is the ceremonial sword, or what you would have used on ceremonial occasions, I'm going to angle the blade, so you don't have to write in to say you shouldn't angle the blade or something like that. This will be cleaned, and there's a special cream that you put on it that's used in the Imperial War Museum, which I got, and I will put that on it, which will preserve it. And if you collect swords, the main thing about them is do not, I say again, do not leave the swords in the scabbards. You get the leather scabbards, you get the metal scabbards. And what do? They encase the blade. And because it's encased, you can get some form of condensation in there. And if you've handled a sword, you haven't cleaned the sword, and you've put it in and left it, you'll end up with rust. And you can't do anything with it. You can clean it up a little bit, but if you look at that, the guard there, it's got rust in it. I spoke to the owner, and he said the only way that he could possibly get rid of that is by having it dipped. But he doesn't want to do that because it's a part of the sword, the history of the sword, and he's got it, and it's not too bad. Now, on the blade, and I don't know if Richie's got very close in, but it's hard to do with the light reflection and stuff like this. But on it, it's got W.E. Brown, 12th Battalion, South Wales Borderers. And it's beautifully engraved, I tell you. It's a pleasure to look at. And this again is a Wilkinson sword, and the number is there. I will ask the person who owns it if he sends off for any information on it. I'll come back and let you know. So if you collect them, wait out, and that is a sword. Now the sword's got a pommel on it, an acorn or whatever you want to do it, and that hangs down, and all this is put into the scabbard. And that hangs from the belt. The sword goes in. Now, this is attached to what they call the Sam Browne. Now, Sam Browne was an officer that lost his arm. And he butchered, altered, done something to it to make a piece of equipment that he could carry a pistol and his sword that he could use with one hand. And from that day to this, it's called a Sam Browne. Mind you, if you were in his regiment and he was an officer, you wouldn't go up and say, "Hi, Sam." You more likely need something to do it. But that is basically the swords. Different regiments have different ways of doing it. This year is a Fusilier type. So they got the cap badge or the collar dog or the badge for the berry on it to mark it. They're not cheap. This one, because the sword, the scabbard, and the frog come together, and it was bought about, I think he turned around and said he bought it about 3 years ago. And at that time, this one was valued at £875. See what I've done there? I've now given you a bit of Antiques Roadshow because the price. Don't tell them, otherwise they might have me for it. But it's well worth the money. If I had seen it before the person who owns it, I would have had it. I don't want to say too much about it because it'd be more interesting for you to research the swords and about it. But this is the important thing about this one. It was made for an officer in the regiment from other officers in the regiment to distinguish what he'd done in a battle, World War I. Right? Now, we are hoping to do a lot more. And if we can, we will be putting them out quite a lot. But you can always send a message if there's something particular you want us to do. Can't guarantee we'll do it, but I will say we'll only do it if we've got the stuff to show. There's nothing stopping you turning around and saying, "I have got, can I come down and show you?" We'll put one on the film. I'll have to go now because Richie's got his hands folded across his chest. I know it's his chest because it's resting on his stomach. And he's indicating, cut too long. Oh, he's me and I. So it's good night from him, and it's good night from here.